A quiet EBT change that could catch millions off guard. Right now, millions of Americans who rely on EBT and SNAP benefits are approaching a major change without realizing it. There is no dramatic announcement, no official letter sent to most households. Yet, in just a matter of days, the way EBT cards can be used at grocery stores is set to shift in a very real way. This is not speculation. It is not a rumor spreading online. It is a policy change tied to new USDA waivers that quietly take effect at the start of the year. And because the rollout is fragmented, many people will not understand what changed until they are standing at the checkout counter. For families living on tight budgets, predictability matters. Knowing what you can and cannot buy with your benefits is part of daily planning. When those rules change suddenly without clear communication, the consequences go beyond inconvenience. They can create stress, confusion, and even public embarrassment. What makes this situation especially difficult is that the changes do not apply evenly across the country. Some states are affected, others are not, and even among the affected states, the rules are not the same. In this series, we are going to slow this conversation down. We will explain what is changing, why it is happening, who is most affected, and what practical steps can help you avoid problems. This is not about panic. It is about awareness before the clock runs out. The 10-day deadline. Most SNAP households never heard about one detail that makes this EBT update especially concerning is how quickly it is happening. According to the information in the document, recipients are being given roughly 10 days of notice before the changes take effect. For a program that supports millions of households, that is an extremely short window. Starting January 1st, new rules tied to USDA waivers begin to apply. These waivers give individual states permission to restrict which foods can be purchased using SNAP benefits. The problem is not just the restriction itself, it is the lack of consistent communication. Most SNAP households did not receive a clear warning letter. There was no nationwide announcement explaining what would change, when it would change, and how it would affect everyday shopping. As a result, many families may walk into grocery stores after January 1st, assuming nothing is different, only to find out at the register that it is. The 10-day alert matters because SNAP shopping is not spontaneous. People plan meals, stretch benefits across the month, and buy familiar items they know fit their budget. Sudden rule changes disrupt that planning immediately. What makes this even more complicated is that only certain states are affected. Others will see no change at all. This uneven rollout increases confusion and makes it harder for recipients to know whether they should even be concerned. In short, the deadline is real, the notice is short, and awareness is low. That combination is what puts so many households at risk of being caught off guard. The 18 states affected and why the rules are not the same everywhere. One of the most confusing parts of this EBT change is that it does not apply nationwide. Instead, the update affects 18 specific states, each operating under its own USDA waiver. And that lack of uniformity is exactly what creates problems. Under these waivers, states are allowed to decide for themselves which foods can no longer be purchased with SNAP benefits. There is no single federal list, no standardized definition. What is restricted in one state may still be allowed in another. This means two families with identical benefits can face completely different rules depending on where they live. A product that scans without issue in one state may be rejected just across the border. For recipients, that makes planning extremely difficult. Even worse, many states have not clearly published or explained their full restriction lists in a way that is easy to understand. Some lists are vague, others rely on technical product categories that shoppers never see on store shelves. For grocery stores, this creates pressure as well. Cashiers are expected to enforce rules that are changing and inconsistent. Mistakes can lead to penalties for the store or embarrassment for the shopper. For SNAP households, the takeaway is clear. You cannot assume the rules are the same everywhere. Knowing whether your state is one of the 18 affected and understanding how your state's rules differ is now essential. This uneven rollout is not just inconvenient. It is the reason so many people will be surprised at checkout if they are not prepared. The foods being restricted and why the list is so large. One detail that has shocked many SNAP recipients is the sheer size of the food restriction lists now being discussed. Depending on the state, the number of affected products is not small. In fact, estimates suggest up to 120,000 food items could be impacted nationwide. The most commonly restricted categories include sugary beverages, sodas, energy drinks, candies, and certain desserts. On the surface, these categories may sound narrow, but in reality, they cover thousands of brand name products, store brands, and regional variations. For example, a single soda brand can appear in dozens of sizes, flavors, and packaging types. Each one counts as a separate product. When states restrict a category rather than a specific item, the list grows rapidly and often invisibly to the shopper. This is where confusion sets in. Grocery store shelves do not label items as SNAP approved or SNAP restricted in a clear, consistent way. A product that looks identical to another may scan differently at checkout based on its ingredients or classification in the system. For families relying on familiar, affordable foods, this creates immediate disruption. Shoppers may fill their carts as usual, only to have items rejected at the register without warning. The size of the restriction list matters because it increases the likelihood of surprise. The larger the list, the harder it is for recipients to memorize or predict what will be allowed. This is not about one or two items being removed. It is about entire categories disappearing overnight in certain states, and that reality is what makes preparation so important. What can go wrong at checkout and why this is a real concern? One of the most immediate consequences of these EBT changes will not happen on paper. It will happen at the checkout counter in real time with real people watching. When restricted items are scanned, the system does not offer gentle explanations. It simply rejects the item. For SNAP recipients, that moment can be confusing, frustrating, and embarrassing, especially when the shopper had no warning that the rules had changed. The situation becomes even more difficult because enforcement is inconsistent. Cashiers are not always trained on the details of new restrictions. Some may try to help, others may simply tell the customer the item is not allowed and move on. Either way, the burden falls on the shopper to react quickly. Long checkout lines can form as items are removed, alternatives are searched for, or payments are split. Parents shopping with children, seniors, and people with disabilities are especially affected by these delays. From the store's perspective, mistakes carry consequences as well. If a retailer allows restricted items to be purchased with EBT, the penalties can be severe, including temporary bans from accepting EBT payments, sometimes lasting 6 months or more. That puts pressure on employees to strictly enforce rules, even when the rules are unclear. This is why the concern is real. These changes do not just alter what can be bought, they change the shopping experience itself, and for many households, that experience becomes more stressful overnight. Why stores are under pressure and how that affects shoppers. While much of the attention is on SNAP recipients, grocery stores are also under intense pressure as these new EBT rules take effect, and that pressure directly affects the shopping experience for millions of people. Under the new USDA waivers, stores are responsible for enforcing state-specific restrictions. If a retailer allows restricted items to be purchased with EBT, even by mistake, the consequences can be severe. In some cases, stores face temporary suspension from accepting EBT, sometimes for 6 months or longer. For small neighborhood grocery stores, that penalty can be devastating. EBT customers often make up a large portion of their business. Losing the ability to accept EBT can threaten the store's survival. As a result, many stores are choosing to enforce the rules as strictly as possible. Cashiers may be instructed to remove any questionable item rather than risk a violation. There is little room for judgment or flexibility. For shoppers, this means fewer second chances at the register. If an item is flagged, it is likely coming out of the cart, regardless of intent or confusion. Employees are not trying to single anyone out. They are trying to protect their jobs and their store. This dynamic changes the tone of the shopping experience. What was once routine can suddenly feel tense. And when enforcement becomes stricter without clear communication, frustration grows on all sides. Understanding this pressure helps explain why these changes feel abrupt and unforgiving. It is not personal, but it is real, and it is shaping how EBT shopping works moving forward. Who is most affected by these EBT changes? While these EBT changes affect millions of households, the impact is not evenly distributed. Certain groups will feel the consequences much more sharply and often much faster than others. Families with children are among the most affected. Many rely on affordable, familiar food items that now fall into restricted categories in some states. When those items are suddenly unavailable, parents are forced to adjust meal plans on the spot, often with limited alternatives that fit both budget and nutrition needs. Seniors are another group at higher risk. Older adults using SNAP often have fixed incomes, limited mobility, and established shopping routines. Sudden changes at checkout can be confusing and stressful, especially when explanations are unclear or inconsistent. Low-wage workers and single-parent households also face disproportionate strain. These families often shop carefully, calculating each purchase to stretch benefits across the entire month. When items are rejected unexpectedly, it disrupts that balance and can lead to shortages later in the month. People with disabilities may face additional challenges. Longer checkout times, repeated item removals, and crowded store environments can make an already difficult task even harder. The common thread here is vulnerability. These changes do not affect occasional SNAP users the same way they affect those who depend on benefits every month to meet basic needs. Understanding who is most affected helps explain why this issue goes beyond policy debate. It touches daily life, dignity, and access to food, and that is why awareness matters now, not later. Why this change feels so sudden and poorly communicated. One of the biggest questions people are asking is simple. How did something this significant arrive with so little warning? And the answer lies in how these changes were implemented, not in their size. The EBT update did not come from a single national announcement. Instead, it emerged through USDA waivers granted to individual states, each moving on its own timeline. That fragmented approach makes coordinated communication extremely difficult, and in many cases, it simply did not happen. Most SNAP recipients were not sent clear, direct notices explaining what would change, when it would change, or how it would affect their shopping. Some states posted updates on government websites that many beneficiaries never visit. Others relied on indirect messaging that was easy to miss. The result is what we see now, a short countdown, widespread confusion, and millions of people learning about the change through word of mouth or at the checkout counter. This is not how programs serving vulnerable populations typically operate. SNAP depends on clarity and consistency. When communication breaks down, the burden shifts to the people least equipped to absorb surprises. The suddenness is not just about timing, it is about preparation. Families were not given enough time to adjust budgets, revise shopping lists, or ask questions. That is why this change feels abrupt, not because it was hidden, but because it was rolled out quietly, unevenly, and without the kind of explanation people need to adapt smoothly. What SNAP recipients should do right now to avoid problems. With these changes approaching quickly, the most important question becomes, what should SNAP recipients do right now? The answer is not panic, but preparation. The first step is confirming whether your state is one of the 18 affected by the USDA waivers. This matters because if your state is not included, your shopping rules may not change at all. Assuming rules apply everywhere can create unnecessary stress. If your state is affected, the next step is understanding your state's specific restrictions. That does not mean memorizing a long product list. It means identifying categories that may no longer be allowed and adjusting shopping habits accordingly. Creating a focused shopping list is one of the simplest protections. Sticking to staple items, fruits, vegetables, meats, grains, and basic dairy, reduces the chance of surprise at checkout. Avoid experimenting with unfamiliar packaged foods until the new rules are clearer. It may also help to speak with staff at your regular grocery store. Some stores are posting notices or training employees to help customers navigate changes. While they may not have all the answers, they often know which items are most commonly rejected. If possible, purchasing familiar items before the change takes effect can reduce immediate disruption. This is not hoarding. It is planning. Prepared shoppers experience fewer problems. And in moments like this, preparation is the strongest form of protection. Why buying ahead may help some families, but not everyone. As the effective date approaches, many SNAP households are asking whether buying certain items ahead of time is a smart move. For some families, the answer is yes, but with important limits. Buying ahead can help reduce immediate disruption, especially for households that rely on familiar products now facing restrictions. Stocking up on non-perishable items that you already use regularly can provide short-term stability while new rules settle in. However, this strategy is not realistic for everyone. SNAP benefits are limited, and many families do not have the flexibility to spend more in one shopping trip. Storage space, dietary needs, and household size all play a role in whether buying ahead is practical. There is also a risk of overbuying items that may still be allowed after the changes, or buying products that do not fit long-term nutrition plans. Preparation should not turn into waste. The most effective approach is selective planning. Focus on essentials you know your household consumes consistently. Avoid impulse purchases driven by uncertainty. And remember that buying ahead is meant to ease transition, not solve the problem permanently. It is also important to recognize equity. Families with more flexibility can adapt more easily than those living month to month. That reality is part of why these changes are controversial. Buying ahead may help some families smooth the transition, but it should never be treated as a requirement or expectation. Every household situation is different, and planning should reflect that reality. The broader impact on food access and community stores beyond individual shopping trips, these EBT changes carry broader consequences for food access, especially in low-income neighborhoods where options are already limited. Many community grocery stores depend heavily on SNAP customers. When restrictions expand suddenly and unevenly, stores are forced to adjust inventory, retrain staff, and sometimes remove entire product lines. That can reduce choice on shelves, even for items that remain eligible. In areas considered food deserts, the impact is magnified. Smaller stores may decide certain products are no longer worth stocking if there is confusion about eligibility or fear of penalties. Over time, that can shrink options for everyone in the neighborhood, not just SNAP users. There is also the administrative burden. Store owners must keep up with changing state rules, update point-of-sale systems, and ensure compliance to avoid sanctions. These costs are absorbed quietly and can push marginal businesses closer to closure. For communities, this creates a ripple effect. Fewer stores mean longer travel distances for groceries, higher prices due to reduced competition, and less convenience for seniors and families without reliable transportation. This is why the conversation cannot stop at individual choices. Policy changes that seem narrow can reshape local food systems in ways that are hard to reverse. Understanding this broader impact helps explain why many advocates are concerned, not just about what people can buy, but about where they can shop and how communities are affected in the long run. Why these restrictions raise fairness and dignity. Concerns beyond logistics and enforcement, these EBT changes raise deeper questions about fairness and dignity. For many SNAP recipients, the issue is not just what they can buy, but how they are treated in the process. When restrictions are enforced unevenly and without clear communication, the burden falls disproportionately on people already facing financial stress. Being told at checkout that an item is not allowed without warning can feel humiliating, especially when others are waiting behind you. There is also the question of consistency. Two shoppers with the same benefits can be treated very differently depending on the state they live in. That lack of uniformity creates a sense of arbitrariness that undermines trust in the program. Critics argue that these restrictions shift responsibility away from policymakers and onto beneficiaries and store employees. Instead of addressing nutrition through education or incentives, the rules rely on point-of-sale rejection, public, immediate, and often confusing. For seniors, people with disabilities, and parents shopping with children, this experience can be especially difficult. It turns a basic task, buying food, into a moment of stress and uncertainty. Programs like SNAP were designed to support dignity as well as access. When implementation feels punitive or poorly explained, that mission is weakened. Understanding these concerns is important because policy outcomes are not measured only in dollars saved or items restricted. They are measured in daily experiences, and those experiences matter. What this means for SNAP policy moving forward. Beyond the immediate confusion and disruption, this EBT update may signal a broader shift in how SNAP policy is being shaped. While these changes are presented as state-level experiments, they raise questions about what comes next. Allowing states to impose their own restrictions creates a precedent. If these waivers expand, SNAP could become increasingly fragmented, with rules varying widely from one state to another. That would mark a significant departure from the program's original intent to provide consistent nutritional support nationwide. Supporters argue that states should have flexibility to promote healthier choices. Critics counter that restricting purchases without expanding access to affordable alternatives simply limits choice without improving outcomes. The debate is far from settled. What is clear is that implementation matters as much as intent. When policy changes arrive without clear guidance, adequate notice, or uniform standards, trust in the system erodes. Beneficiaries begin to feel uncertain not just about what they can buy, but about how stable the program really is. For SNAP recipients, this uncertainty makes planning harder. For stores, it increases compliance costs, and for communities, it raises concerns about access and equity. This moment may shape future decisions. If confusion and backlash grow, policymakers may be forced to revisit how restrictions are designed and communicated. If not, similar changes could become more common. Understanding this bigger picture helps explain why this update matters beyond January 1st. It is not just a rule change, it is a signal about the direction SNAP policy may be heading. Practical steps to protect yourself at the checkout counter. With these EBT changes taking effect, one of the most practical concerns for SNAP recipients is avoiding problems at the checkout counter. While you cannot control the policy itself, there are steps you can take to reduce stress and confusion. First, shop with intention. Stick to food categories that are clearly allowed, such as fresh produce, meats, grains, dairy, and basic pantry staples. These items are far less likely to be flagged under the new restrictions. Second, separate uncertain items. If you are unsure whether a product is allowed, consider placing it separately so it can be removed quickly if needed. This small step can prevent delays and awkward moments during checkout. Third, stay calm if an item is rejected. The cashier is enforcing system rules, not making a personal judgment. Politely asking for the item to be removed and continuing the transaction helps keep the situation from escalating. It can also help to shop at stores where you are familiar with the layout and staff. Some retailers are better prepared than others and may post notices or offer guidance on commonly restricted items. Finally, protect your dignity. If a transaction becomes uncomfortable, remember that the issue lies with unclear policy, not with you. Being prepared helps, but perfection is not required. These steps will not eliminate all challenges, but they can significantly reduce friction. In a system that changes quickly, practical preparation is often the best defense. Final thoughts on the EBT changes and what comes next. As we bring this discussion to a close, it is important to step back and look at what these EBT changes really represent. This is not just about soda, candy, or specific food items. It is about how quickly rules can change and how unprepared many people are when they do. The most troubling part of this update is not the policy itself, but the way it is being implemented. Short notice, uneven rules, limited communication. Those factors combine to create confusion for the very people SNAP is meant to support. For recipients, the key takeaway is awareness. Knowing whether your state is affected, understanding which categories may be restricted, and preparing before you shop can reduce stress and prevent uncomfortable moments at checkout. These steps do not solve the problem, but they do give you back some control. For communities, this change highlights a larger issue. When policies are rolled out without clear guidance, the burden shifts downward to families, seniors, store employees, and small businesses. That burden is felt quietly, one transaction at a time. What happens next will depend on how states respond and whether policymakers address the confusion these changes create. This may be the beginning of a larger conversation about how SNAP rules are shaped in the future. Until then, staying informed, planning carefully, and protecting your dignity are the most powerful tools you have. Quiet changes can have loud consequences, but knowledge helps soften the impact.